barber's wife came to the window and called softly, "Why are you keeping your lover waiting so long?" she whispered. "If you're going to come out quickly, otherwise tell him to go away." "My dear sister," the shoemaker's wife cried out, "if you have any feelings for me, please come and release me and let me tie you to the pillar in my place. I just want to apologize to my boyfriend. I'll be back at once and I'll be eternally grateful to you." The barber's wife agreed to this arrangement and pleased her and released her. Just then the shoemaker woke up and called his wife. The barber's wife was afraid to answer in case he should recognize her voice. He called several times, but she didn't utter a sound. More furious than ever, he picked up his cobbler's knife, rushed upon the woman, and slashed off her nose and stuck it in her hand. "There," he shouted, "give this to your lover with my compliments." When the shoemaker's wife returned, she found her friend with her nose cut off and felt very sorry. These are crazy stories, you see. And felt very sorry. She begged her pardon more than once and set her free. Then she bound herself to the pillar. The barber's wife, for her part, went home with her nose in her hand. All of this the ascetic watched. The shoemaker's wife rested for a while. Then she raised her hands to heaven and began to cry in a loud voice, "King of heaven, if you know that my husband has falsely suspected me and has done me wrong, thy grace have pity on me and give me back my nose." "You wicked woman," the shoemaker said, "what words are these?" "You cruel brute," his wife responded. "Get up and see how God has been good to me to make amends for your savage impetuosity. As you see, my innocence has been established because God gave me back my nose and would not suffer me to be seen among people maimed and put to shame." At this, the man jumped out of bed, lighted the lamp, rushed to the pillar, and he saw his wife perfectly whole, her nose right in the middle of her face. This is a very entertaining story, if nothing else. He at once begged her pardon, confessing his sin, implored her to forgive him, saying that he should never have done such a thing without clear proof and ought never to have listened to vile slander and inflicted such suffering on his good and innocent wife. But what about the barber? Meanwhile, the barber's wife arrived home greatly distraught, casting about in her mind how to explain her predicament to her husband and neighbors. Presently her husband woke up and called her to bring him his instruments. As he had to go to attend a respectable gentleman, she delayed some while. Then she gave him his razor, nothing else. In a rage, the barber flung the razor out into the night and sent his wife sprawling after it. These are really nice people. They treat each other with very great gentleness and affection. "My nose! My nose!" the woman screamed. This is supposed to be funny and slapstick. The barber was dumbfounded when he saw the state she was in. All the neighbors ran and rebuked him considerably. So it goes on like that. The barber was completely at a loss of what to say and could offer no explanations. The magistrate therefore passed judgment against him, sentenced him to punishment. At this, the pious man, unable to contain himself longer, stood up in the court. "Look," the pious man said, "you should reflect upon this matter and deliberate well before jumping to conclusion. It wasn't the thief who took my gown. It wasn't the goats that killed the fox. It wasn't the poison that slew the bad woman. It wasn't the barber who cut off his wife's nose. We brought these calamities upon ourselves." Thereupon the magistrate removed his hand from the barber's throat and wanted some explanation. "Yes," the Sufi saint said, "if I hadn't desired to have many disciples and followers, if I hadn't been taken in by the thief's taradiddle and led him into my house, he would never have found a chance to steal my cloak. If the fox hadn't been so greedy and had refrained from blood-sucking, the goats would never have butted him. If the bad woman hadn't plotted to poison her fellow creatures, she wouldn't have flung her precious life to the wind." That's a joke. "If the cobbler's wife had been an honest woman, she wouldn't have gotten a beating. And if the barber's wife had aided and abetted her in the naughtiness, she would never have had her nose chopped off." Back to the storytellers. "I have quoted this instance," Kalila concluded, "so that you may realize that you have brought all this misfortune upon yourself and that you did so by being stupid enough to overlook the likely consequences of your actions." Well, it goes on like that. That is the first example of adab literature. Let me give these, I think there's two more in here which I think are really good versions of it. This one, I hope you enjoyed that little thing. I'm sorry I didn't include it in your collection. But it does give you an idea of what this, no better way, I mean, I can tell you about Ibn al-Muqaffa, but actually reading it is something else. This story you have here is really, I think, a very instructive story. You see, it always is trying to instruct you how to get by in the modern world, as it were, and how to live in a dangerous court climate. Here is the story you have on page 73. This you do have in your book. al-Muqaffa, Ibn al-Muqaffa was executed in 757. Some of you who are Muslim in the room will say, good, he deserved it. But in any case, his literature did survive, and it's taught in schools in the Islamic world today, in lower schools, as part of the literature curriculum. I don't know how they can teach it. It's so vulgar in some places, like it takes my breath away. But I guess that's part of reality. When the former story was finished, King Dab-Shalim commanded Bidpai to relate the story of the man, the success of whose pursuit and the fulfillment of his wishes is immediately followed by the loss of what he obtained. More stories with a moral. The philosopher replied, the acquisition of desired good is often attended with less difficulty than the means of preserving, and whoever cannot secure the possession of what he has got into his power may be compared to the tortoise in the following fable. So again, this is how to hold on to what you've got. This is how to, you couldn't have a better shopkeeper, businessman mentality, right? It's told a certain king of the monkeys, whose name was Mahir, that being very old and infirm, he was attacked by a young competitor for his crown. These monkeys are acting like monkeys, but they look like monkeys, but they behave like humans. And was overcome and obliged to take flight. So he retired, it's the last selection, 73-4. So he retired to the riverside and discovered a fig tree and climbed up into it and determined to make it his home. And as he was one day eating the fruit, a fig fell down, and the noise of it, occasioned by falling into the water, delighted him so much that he never ate without repeating the experiment. Okay, here's the setup. As an old monkey who lost everything, he used to be the big shot, but now he's nobody. He's been pushed out to pasture like the governor of California. And so he says it's enough for him to sit on a tree and eat a fig. But that's not enough for him, because you see the same thing. These people are never content. They always want more. That was what the previous story said. You should be content with what you have, is what this book is saying. And so he would throw the pit down, and he liked the sound of it, or sometimes he would throw a fig down. He liked the sound of it hitting the water. So every time he ate, he threw a fig down and to listen to how it splashed in the water. It was innocent, right? Like the bird's nest story. And so, he thinks it's harmless. Every time he ate, he did that. But underneath the tree in the water was a tortoise. In fact, this is not a tortoise. A tortoise is a land turtle. A turtle is something that swims. A tortoise stays on the land. This is actually a turtle, not a tortoise. But he's calling it a tortoise in our translation. It shouldn't be called a turtle. Who was below, and as often as the fig fell down, he devoured it. And he always, in many days, got a regular supply. And he thought that this monkey was actually paying attention to him, caring about him. Again, mistake of perceptions. Therefore,